Greetings, War Thunderers. This is Longshot with you again, and welcome to the first video in a series I'm calling Analyze This. In these videos I'll look at replays sent to me by viewers, featuring a part of a battle where they found themselves in a bad situation and want to know how it happened, what they could have done better in order to avoid it, and if there was any way out of their predicament. The idea for this series was suggested by Bf109 who sent me this replay. He lost 2 planes during this battle, and obviously I'm going to point out the mistakes he made that led to his demise. But my aim is not to criticise his flying, rather to use this as something we can all learn from, and therefore improve our skills in War Thunder. To set the scene, this is an arcade domination battle on the Mozdok map, and he started off flying a Bf109 G-2. NCF had only 3 days flying experience in fighters, but in this battle he engaged several boom and zoom attacks and showed a good understanding of the tactic, and a dedication to preserving his plane. Okay, so here's the sequence that led to the loss of his 109. He's approaching the airfield, gained enough altitude to enable a fast boom and zoom attack, and he spots an Me-410 isolated off to the right and sets course for an intercept. He's commencing a long-range shallow dive, zooms in to observe the 410, then banks to follow its turn toward the airfield, and then commits to the attack. He waits till he's nice and close before opening fire, and drops the 410 with an accurate burst. Starts to lift into a zoom climb and sees a Yak-9 approaching for a head-on. Squeezes off a few shots and then dodges to avoid. He doesn't turn to engage the Yak, instead he lifts to continue his zoom climb, and turns to look and see what the Yak's doing. The Yak's pulled a 180-degree turn and is chasing, so NCF climbs a little more steeply, probably assuming the Yak will lack the energy to keep up, but that's not the case. He's closing in. Keeps the climb going with a gentle left-hand turn, maybe hoping to induce the Yak to stall, but the Yak is now in guns range, and it's the 109 that's out of energy. He drops the nose to avoid stalling his plane, then turns back toward the Yak, but it's not enough to avoid the next volley, which rips off the end of a wing. NCF hasn't given up yet. He goes into a dive, snap-rolling his plane to make it look like he's out of control, obviously hoping the Yak will assume he's dead and fly away looking for another target. But NCF's not dead yet, manages to level off before hitting the ground. I think he considers attacking that Spitfire with the thought of doing whatever damage he can before losing his plane, but the Yak's still on his 6. He needs to engage in some serious rolling to make him overshoot. A swarm of enemy seagulls joins the party, and then there's one roll too many, and NCF bites the dust. So what mistakes did he make that led to the loss of his plane? There were indeed several mistakes that we can all learn from and avoid making, and before I go through them, how many did you see? What would you have done differently? Okay, let's look at it again. This time I'll pause the video at frequent intervals to analyse the decisions he took. In fact, I'll pause it here. Now obviously this is a replay, so I can't see all the enemy plane icons or the overhead map as he saw it, but it's safe to assume that this target was totally isolated and was heading further away from his fighter spawn. I think most of us would have seen this and the words "free kill" would have flashed before our eyes. But watch what happens. The 410 turns back in the direction of his fighter spawn. No problem, he's still isolated, but attacking him now will also lead our 109 directly toward the enemy fighter spawn as well. And here's where NCF made some crucial mistakes. With boom and zoom attacks, it's essential to think about where the attack's going to take you. In what direction will you be travelling when you extend and zoom climb? Back to safety or into dangerous territory? This situation will obviously take him right toward the enemy fighter spawn. What he needed to do at this point was quickly use free look to glance in that direction and see what was approaching. He could then have either decided to go ahead with the attack, knowing that there'd be a Yak-9 to avoid or engage, or abort the attack and use his energy to climb and reset. But unfortunately he didn't look, so he'll be extending blindly toward the enemy after shooting the 410 down, and I'll pause it there. Okay, at the bottom of his dive he's doing 621 kilometers an hour. If he'd kept that speed, he could possibly have escaped what's about to happen, but unfortunately a lot of the speed is wasted, firstly in an attempt to start a zoom climb, then in a turn to meet the head-on, then in more manoeuvring as he dodges. Just see it bleed away there. By the time he levels out, his speed's dropped to only 424 kilometers an hour. He then resumes the climb before checking on his opponent, and this is going to deplete the speed even further, dropping him down into the low 300s and giving the Yak the opportunity to catch up. And it's at this moment, travelling at only 310 km an hour, that NCF realises the yak's closing the range. Later I'll check to see what the yak did after the head-on and show the speed he was doing at this point. So up till now he's made two mistakes, going for a boom and zoom attack that would take him toward the enemy fighter spawn without looking in that direction first, and then manoeuvring after the attack in a way that lost him a lot of his speed from the dive. He could still have escaped by levelling off now and flying toward friendly fighters. Instead he chose to try and outclimb his opponent, an attempt that was never going to work from a base of only 310 km an hour. Here he almost stalls after the yak's initial burst failed to connect. Even now he could have dived, gone evasive and maybe survived long enough to reach help. Instead he turned back toward the yak, and that sealed his fate. So I'm afraid I'm going to add a fourth error to the list, that of attempting to turn fight a yak at low speed. Gustavs are much happier travelling fast, and at low altitude they're no match for a yak in a dogfight anyway. The death spiral was a great idea, except it took him in a direction where no help would be forthcoming, toward a contested airfield and away from his friendly fighter spawn, which ensured the final loss of his plane. Now it's hard to make clear decisions with a yak 9 on your tail and part of your wing missing, so I'll cut him some slack with this one. Okay, let's see it from the yak's perspective. How did he manage to catch up with the 109 as he zoom climbed? Well, firstly, he's flown straight from spawn in a shallow dive and he has a lot of speed. At this point he's doing 540 km an hour, whereas the 109 was down to 414. And then as the yak turns, he goes into a shallow dive, which minimises the amount of speed he'll lose during the turn. By the time he's come around and has the 109 in his sights, he's still doing 400 km an hour, while the 109 was down to 310 at this point. Both planes are excellent climbers at low altitude, so that 90 km an hour advantage was all the yak needed to outclimb the 109 and get close enough to open fire. You can see the yak itself is getting low on speed here, hence even at this point the 109 could have escaped had it nosed down into an evasive dive. May as well show the rest of it. The 109's going into the fake death spiral with a missing wingtip, and the spiralling serves to spoil the yak's aim as he follows him down. Also makes him slower than the yak at the bottom of the dive, which forces the yak to overshoot, and try as he might, he's unable to get another good shot at the 109. So here's my summary of what went wrong, and how he could have handled the situation better. Hopefully this helps all of us to avoid making similar mistakes. And here come the flock of seagulls. Look at them all. Okay, the second example occurred after he respawned in a Bf109 G-2. Both airfields are in enemy hands and half his team's been eliminated, so he tries to even things up by fast capping B, which at present is undefended. I certainly can't criticise this decision. If he didn't try, then the battle would end quickly anyway, and it did seem worth the risk. And capping an airfield by its very nature does put you in enormous danger. No matter how fast you cap, you're still at ground level, and an enemy can dive on you at much higher speed than you're doing. You can't see it in this replay, but an enemy player had seen him at about this point and started flying this way in a rocket-equipped F4U-1D, and NCF would almost certainly have seen him coming, but by now he's committed to the cap. Very soon bullets are going to start landing behind him on the runway, but he stays the course and caps the airfield. Okay, what now? Corsair's travelling a lot faster than he is. His only hope is to buy time by forcing an overshoot, so he climbs and rolls, and it wasn't enough. I really can't see much wrong with what he did there. It was a bad situation, as it always is when someone attacks you while you're capping. Rolling is always the 109's best defence, 190's, which he certainly tried to utilise. So let's look at it from the Corsair's perspective. Firstly, let me say I'm not a fan of the Corsair pilot's approach here. He's going to start firing from a long way out. He doesn't try to roll his plane to match the 190's heading, he's simply dragging the mouse. And it's at this point here that NCF started his rolling evasion. This is the approximate path he's going to take, and you'll see how that allowed the F4U a few extra seconds to get behind him and fire the rocket at point blank range, just before he would have overshot. Had he turned toward the Corsair's line of approach like this, he would have forced the overshoot sooner and may have prevented the enemy from getting a shot at him. However, it would also have taken him toward the enemy fighter spawn at low speed and low altitude, and as a fresh swarm of enemies arrived shortly afterwards, I think it was safe to say that NCF was doomed at this point, no matter what he did. Indeed, he was doomed the moment he decided to cap the airfield. So this one was less preventable than the first example, and I can't criticise someone for putting their plane on the line by trying to play the objectives, except of course when they're deliberately throwing them away with suicidal tactics, which NCF obviously was not. He judged the cap was possible while keeping his plane alive, and it turned out not to be. That's just how it goes sometimes. I'd like to thank NCF for suggesting the idea for this video and providing this replay. It takes a brave person to expose their flying to public critical analysis, and he's done so in order that we can all learn and benefit. If you have a replay you'd like me to analyse, the easiest way would be to PM me on the forums, though I can't promise I'll use it in a video. I'm obviously looking for the most interesting scenarios, so please don't swamp me with replays of ordinary situations. Remember too that I'm just one guy doing this in his spare time, so if you do send a replay, I'll ask you not to nag me about when or if an analysis video will be uploaded. I'll do the best I can. Anyway, I hope this vid's been helpful to you, and that you're better at landing a plane than our friend here in the Corsair. Until my next video, good hunting, and I'll see you in the skies.